The world's deadliest animal by a long way is the mosquito. Every year, these tiny winged biting insects cause between 725,000 to 1 million deaths worldwide. After them, snakes are the most deadly, responsible for causing around 100,000 deaths annually. That's a huge gap, and the mosquito does not even intend to kill a human when it bites. Mosquitoes act as vectors, transferring viruses and parasites to new hosts, which are transmitted when the insect bites a larger animal. Multiple diseases can be spread in this manner, but the most famous, and one of the most serious, is malaria. Malaria is a virus associated with mass panic, huge numbers of deaths, and painful symptoms regardless of where you live in the world. Although it is now treatable, many people in developing countries are vulnerable to the disease, especially in humid or tropical regions with high numbers of resident mosquitoes. In today's video, we will be examining the disease in full, taking a look at the symptoms, causes and treatments, as well as peering into the lives of the insects that cause it to spread. Please note that parts of this video will discuss medical symptoms in graphic detail. Viewer discretion is advised. Malaria is exclusively a mosquito-borne disease, meaning that it can only be transmitted by bites from these insects. It is passed from organism to organism contact with infected blood, and, while it is not contagious in the same way a cold or flu would be, humans coming into contact with blood infected with malaria, say through transfusions or transplants, are vulnerable. Malaria, at a microscopic stage, is caused specifically by the single-celled protozoans, or eukaryotes, of the genus Plasmodium. There are some 200 species of identified Plasmodium parasites, who grow within the body tissue of vertebrates. But the Plasmodium species most commonly associated with infection to humans is Plasmodium falciparum. At this early stage, they don't infect the host, as they are not making contact with the bloodstream. When fully developed, however, they make their way into the red blood cells of their host and destroy them, which can lead to the onset and spread of the malaria virus. Once they have established themselves as parasites in a host's blood, they may be picked up by a hungry mosquito who can pass the parasites onto a new vertebrate, thus continuing the reproductive cycle. The mosquitoes that transmit the disease to humans are females of the genus Anopheles, or marsh mosquitoes. The mosquito most likely to infect a human is Anopheles gambiae, a complex of 7 species which are more or less identical to one another. Despite there being around 112 genera of known mosquitoes, Anopheles is the only one that is capable of transmitting malaria to humans. Only females of the genus feed on blood, and a mosquito has to be infected with the disease itself to spread it to humans. It does not form within the mosquitoes themselves. When an infected mosquito bites a human, the parasites will enter the bloodstream of the victim via the saliva that is produced when the insect takes a bite. Once infected, the parasites will travel usually to the liver, before making their way into the bloodstream and triggering the symptoms of infection. As the infection is transmitted via blood, it cannot be passed on easily from human to human. Pregnant women carrying the disease can sadly pass the parasites on to their unborn children, causing them to either miscarry or give birth to a child already infected with malaria. The disease can also be transmitted via the sharing of needles when one user has the disease. Certain people are more at risk than others, and aside from pregnant women, those most vulnerable include young children, the elderly, those with weak immune systems, and individuals who have had their spleen removed in surgical operations prior to receiving the infection. The infection is very common in certain parts of the world, specifically where Anopheles mosquitoes enjoy tropical conditions. Large swathes of sub-Saharan Africa are at risk from malaria, as are the tropical regions of South Asia. Humid parts of the Middle East are at risk of the disease, and it is also prevalent in the Americas. Central and South America, as well as parts of the Caribbean such as Haiti, have continuously experienced the threat of malaria, and it has even found its way to some of the more remote Pacific Island nations. Malaria is not found in colder regions such as Europe, North and Central Asia, and the cooler reaches of North America, nor is it typically found in warm, dry regions, such as North Africa and Australia. For those traveling to tropical regions, it is extremely important to check the risk of malaria before you depart. If malaria isn't treated quickly, humans can easily die from the infection caused, even in parts of the world where medical treatment is accessible and advanced. All it takes is just one bite from an infected mosquito to transmit the virus to a human host, and due to it being notoriously difficult to single out and identify, many cases go untreated for too long. Symptoms typically do not start until 7 to 18 days after you've been bitten by the mosquito, and unless the bite is obvious and itchy to begin with, it can be hard to know if you've been bitten. In some extreme cases, the infection can lay dormant in the body as the parasites develop, with symptoms arising months or even years after a bite occurs. The most obvious and common examples of malaria symptoms include feverish sensations, including a fluctuating or very high temperature. Patients may find themselves constantly fluctuating between hot sweats and cold chills, which may be coupled up with nausea, an unsettled stomach, and the frequent need to be sick. This can lead to severe dehydration and the constant need to take in fluids to replenish water levels in the body. Soon, tiredness and headaches will set in, and sensations of confusion can spread as the virus takes root. Over time, your muscles may start to hurt, you'll lose your appetite, and a sore throat or cough may develop, coupled with the difficulty to draw breath. Most alarmingly, malaria can cause jaundice, yellow coloration to appear in the eyes and skin. As red blood cells are destroyed and bilirubin, a yellow pigment, is released. If malaria is left untreated, it can easily lead to death if the virus escalates. This can happen in a number of painful, horrific ways, targeting multiple parts of your body at once. Parasites can actually block small blood vessels leading to the human brain, leading to potential brain damage, seizures, or the onset of a coma. The rupture and failure of internal organs can occur as the parasite makes its way into the kidneys and spleen, which can then trigger internal bleeding throughout the body. As more and more red blood cells are destroyed, it can be harder for oxygen to be transported around the body, which, coupled with fluid build-up in the lungs, can make it even harder to breathe. As the body eventually goes into shock, it will shut down piece by piece, spelling an unfortunate and painful end for a patient who does not seek treatment. Malaria can be diagnosed when doctors take a closer look at a patient's blood, usually through taking blood smears and examining the sample under a microscope. Technicians can then identify the parasites that cause the infection and seek treatment immediately. To save time, some hospitals and labs perform rapid diagnostic tests which can detect antigens in the blood without the need to search for the parasites manually. Some of these tests can even pick up on the specific species of antigen that are attacking a patient's bloodstream, which can help doctors to administer a more efficient treatment. If a patient is in the throes of severe malaria symptoms, a doctor may perform blood tests on the kidney and liver to determine how well these organs are still functioning. These tests can also determine if a patient is suffering from anemia and if additional treatment is required. When malaria has been identified in the bloodstream, the next step is to treat it, usually with anti-malarial medications. Artemisinin-based combination therapy is the most effective treatment for most types of malaria, which involves injecting artesunate into the patient's bloodstream. It is the only medication for malaria that can be injected straight into the bloodstream, which makes it highly efficient at quickly targeting the disease directly where it dwells. Most other anti-malarial treatments are taken in tablet form. These include chloroquine, primaquine, quinine, and doxycycline, which can soon eradicate the infection if it is still in the earlier phases of spreading. Patients who are suffering from extreme malaria symptoms further down the line can also be given a variety of treatments and care to nurse them back to good health. Patients who have lost a lot of water from vomiting can be given fluids to restore their water levels, while medications can ease the pain brought about by stomach cramps, headaches, and nausea. Early treatment is preferred, as patients who are deep into the deadly phases of malaria are much harder to reliably cure. In some regions, the malaria virus has mutated to adapt to anti-malarial medication, and different substances may be needed to ensure that it can be swiftly dealt with. The most effective way to reduce the number of people infected with malaria across the world is to limit the chance of being bitten by an infected mosquito in the first place. Unfortunately, in poorer nations, such as those in Central and Southern Africa, houses may not be built sufficiently well to keep out dangerous biting insects, especially at night when mosquitoes are drawn to the light of towns and villages, when people are most vulnerable to being bitten. One of the most effective tools to combat infection taking hold is the use of a mosquito net, a very thin curtain that is draped over a bed at night. A mosquito will be unable to squeeze through the tiny holes that adorn the fabric, and as such the person will safely remain unbitten and therefore uninfected. Mosquito netting can be used in multiple forms, such as blinds, drapes, and door covers to stop the insects from entering a building in the first place. Of course, these nets are not 100% effective, and there will be individual mosquitoes who find their way through very occasionally, but they do massively limit the spread of disease. Insect repellent containing picaridin or lemon eucalyptus oil can deter the insects from wanting to bite you in the first place. If you are in a region where malaria-carrying mosquitoes are common, consider spraying your exposed skin or cover up as much as you can to stop the insects from reaching your skin in the first place. When traveling to a region known to harbor malarial mosquitoes, you can take anti-malarial tablets in advance to ward off the chance of infection if you do find yourself bitten. Of course, poorer individuals in developing nations do not always have access to such medicine or sprays, or the means of readily selecting efficient clothing, which is where financial aid and charity support comes into play. Against Malaria Foundation, or AMF, are among the leaders in battling malaria in vulnerable nations across the globe, working with healthcare teams in these locations to distribute mosquito nets amongst towns and cities, as well as educating the public on their use. The foundation has stated that for every 600 nets distributed, between 500 to 1,000 cases of malaria are prevented, and at least one life is saved as a result. Since their founding in August 2004, they have distributed 200 million mosquito nets to vulnerable communities across the world. Malaria is a terrifying prospect, especially to those without access to reliable modern healthcare, but it can be stopped. The work of charities and healthcare organizations across the world is revolutionizing the understanding of the disease, and it is now considered to be highly treatable if caught with enough notice. Plenty of lives have been saved since the distribution of mosquito nets and anti-malarial medicine began, and many more will be saved long into the future if charitable work like this continues.